It was supposed to be a quick drive, just 2 hours from the city to my parents' house. I'd done it countless times before, but that night was different. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. As I drove down the empty highway, the clock on the dashboard read 12:07 a.m., and the only sound was the hum of my car's engine. The road was dark, only my headlights cutting through the thick night. I usually enjoyed driving at night, the tranquility, the solitude, but something about that night felt off. It was as if the darkness was swallowing the road ahead, making the headlights seem less effective. As I drove, I noticed the road signs seemed different, too. They were the same green highway signs, but the names of the exits were unfamiliar. I've driven this route so many times that I know every exit by heart, but Stonefield and Crooked Hollow were not exits I'd ever seen before. I chalked it up to my tired mind playing tricks on me, but the unease in my stomach grew. Then I saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a woman, her white dress almost glowing in the dark, her face obscured by long, dark hair. She was holding something in her hands, but I couldn't make out what it was. As I drove past her, she suddenly turned her head towards me, and I swear her eyes were glowing red. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, she was gone. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. It had to be a trick of the light, maybe a shadow playing on my tired mind. But when I looked at the clock, it read 12:07 a.m. again. I had been driving for at least half an hour, but the time hadn't changed. Panic started to creep in. I checked my phone for the time, but it was dead, despite being fully charged when I left. The highway, which was usually busy even at night, was completely deserted. No other cars, no lights in the distance, just endless darkness. I kept driving, hoping to see a familiar exit, but the signs continued to be wrong, the road stretching on endlessly. The fear in my chest was suffocating. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights approaching. Relief washed over me as the car got closer, but as it passed, my blood ran cold. It was the same car as mine, the same make, model, even the same color, and in the driver's seat was me. I could see myself clearly, eyes wide with terror, as I drove past. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My heart pounded so hard that I thought it might burst. I looked in the rearview mirror, and the car was gone. But something else caught my eye. In the back seat, there was a figure. A woman in a white dress, her long, dark hair covering her face. I froze, unable to move, my breath hitching in my throat. Slowly, she lifted her head, and those red eyes stared back at me through the mirror. I swerved the car, trying to get her out, but she was gone. The road in front of me twisted and turned, warping into something unrecognizable. The trees along the roadside bent in unnatural ways, their branches reaching out like claws. I don't know how long I drove or what direction I was going. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. My mind was slipping, the line between reality and nightmare blurring. Finally, I saw an exit sign that I recognized, my parents' town. I took the exit, the road leading me down a winding path. The oppressive feeling in my chest lifted slightly as I saw the familiar streets, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled into my parents' driveway, the car coming to a stop. I sat there, trembling, unable to process what had just happened. When I finally mustered the courage to look in the rearview mirror, the back seat was empty. I stumbled out of the car and ran to the front door, desperate to escape the nightmare. But as I reached for the door, I caught a reflection in the window. A woman in a white dress, standing behind me, her red eyes glowing in the dark. I spun around, but there was no one there. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my hands shook so badly that I fumbled with my keys. When I finally managed to unlock the door, I burst inside, slamming it behind me. The house was dark and silent, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I called out for my parents, but there was no response. I quickly made my way to their bedroom, hoping to find some comfort. But when I pushed open the door, the room was empty. The bed was made, everything was in its place, but there was no sign of them. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the nightstand, where my mom always kept her favorite family photo, the picture had changed. It was the same frame, the same setting, but the faces were different. It was me, standing with the woman in the white dress, her red eyes staring out of the photograph. She was holding my hand, a twisted smile on her face, as if she belonged there. And in the background, where my parents should have been, the house was burning, flames licking the sky. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that I was still dreaming, but the fear gnawing at my insides was all too real. I backed out of the room, heart pounding, and nearly tripped over something lying in the hallway. It was a small, black notebook, something I'd never seen before. My hands shook as I picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with writing, my handwriting. Every page detailed the same nightmarish drive I had just experienced, the same terror, the same woman with the red eyes. But then, at the very end, there was an entry I hadn't written. The words seemed to crawl across the page, scrawled in blood-red ink. You can't escape. The road never ends. Welcome to your new home. I dropped the notebook, my mind screaming at me to run, to get out of the house, but my legs wouldn't move. The air around me grew colder, and I felt a presence behind me, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Slowly, I turned around. The woman in the white dress stood at the end of the hallway, her red eyes glowing brighter than ever. She began to walk toward me, her steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the walls closing in around me. The lights flickered, and with each flicker, she was closer, until she was right in front of me, her icy breath on my face. You belong to the road now, she whispered, her voice echoing in my head like a death knell. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her cold hands reached for me, and as they touched my skin, everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back in my car, parked on the side of the highway. The clock read 12:07 a.m. I looked around, disoriented, trying to piece together what had just happened. The road was empty, the night silent. I could see the familiar lights of my parents' town in the distance, just a short drive away. But I didn't move, couldn't. The fear was still there, gnawing at my insides, telling me that if I drove any further, I'd never escape. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and I forced myself to look in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and started the car. As I pulled back onto the road, I kept glancing in the mirror, half expecting to see those red eyes staring back at me. But the road ahead seemed normal again, the exit signs familiar. The fear began to ebb away, replaced by a lingering unease. I was almost home, almost safe,